Yeah, and I think it emphasizes to me also, so within that decision-making process that you're talking about, it emphasizes to me the importance of data and
Yes.
insights. And I think that's something that procurement teams, particularly in services where it's really complicated, really nuanced,
Yes.
they're massively lacking. Because if you're going to bubble up these ideas and you're going to come up with the best ideas, you've got to verify them. It's got to be evidence-based decision making,
Yes.
especially when you're going to the C-suite. They want to see some backgrounds. Have you thought this through? Have you had your legal head on and kind of referenced this stuff and worked out, put some numbers and some metrics and some information behind it. And I think that's a critical thing that procurement teams have got to solve as part of this.
Yeah.
And because otherwise you're still stuck in the scenario that exists at the moment, where actually chief financial officers will often say they're just looking at budget when it comes to services because they don't know what they got. So there's no emphasis on value. And if you slash your services procurement budget by 30% to save money, you might be really harming the business, because that services spend might be really driving the top line, really driving profit. Unless you understand that, you can't do that effectively. You can't make those sort of decisions effectively. You're just saying, was it to budget, was it not? Slash the budget, raise the budget, whatever it might be. And that's just, it seems so primitive particularly when a lot of these services are business critical, they're extremely complex, and the amount that's spent on outsourced services, somewhere between 1 trillion and 20 trillion globally every year, surely it deserves that focus. And okay, it's not easy, but surely it's worth it, because even just when you look at it from a cost saving point of view, if you really understand what you're spending, you might see that you're spending stuff with a supplier that's not really delivering anything, or the supplier's doing a really bad job. But if you don't have visibility of that, procurement are removed from the situation of power, because if the business stakeholders can see that and maybe they're covering it up, or whatever their own motivations are, procurement are removed from that situation. As we talked about before, it might be getting involved up to the point of contract signature and then being kind of maneuvered into the background. And I think, procurement can capture data and they can get access to data without getting in the way as such, and adding to the process rather than, sometimes, business buyers will, want procurement to get out of the way. I don't want to have to do this. I don't want to have to do that. If you can make things easy for people to carry on interacting, but just capture the data, then procurement are stewards of that data. Yes. And they can be the conduit for the C-suite to basically manage this process, manage this extended workforce capacity, in the sense that they might be scaling it up, they might be scaling it down, they might be putting controls on, letting it happen and just read the data, all of these things. And I think there's a huge dearth of information, particularly in services procurement. I think, goods and materials, they got it pretty well buttoned up, because it's a much more binary scenario. But again, it comes down to the nuances of services. How do you measure an output? How do you measure an outcome? There are quantitative aspects to how work is delivered, how service is delivered. That's typically around things like, was it on time? Was it to budget? How far did the scope creep? But very importantly, it's quantitative factors as well, in the sense of, did the supplier do a good job? As a business stakeholder, am I pleased? Did they exhibit great sustainability? Was there fantastic innovation? Whatever factors it might be, those qualitative and quantitative pieces of information can be combined and used incredibly effectively by procurement. But I think that's so far been a hugely missed opportunity, as I say, particularly when you consider the level of spend there is.
Yeah. And I think if we don't include services in the move towards sort of self-guided buying, the problem is going to explode, because it is so easy now for distributed buyers in an organization to find different creative ways to contract for services. I mean, there was a time when things were so manual that if it didn't go through sort of the traditional procurement, finance, AP kind of thing, you can't bring in a contractor, you can't access services. Services take all kinds of forms now. And it's very easy for anybody with like a company P card, in some cases, to sign up for a basic service package, depending on what they're looking to do. And so rather than saying, no, that's wrong, that's outside our process, you're creating risk, right? Then you're just like teaching everybody to hide it better. we would be better off kind of throwing the gates open. And like you said, saying, hey, listen, we need to know what's going on. This is very, very important for all these reasons. And so instead of making it harder for you, we're going to make it easier for you. But that comes with two things. We need to have visibility, and you need to take responsibility. Because I think there does need to be this sense of, why do we want someone, in some corner of operations hiding the fact that they have a service provider that's not doing a good job simply because they don't want to be in trouble for picking the wrong service provider? That's a problem that needs to be fixed, and we can fix it easily. But if they don't know how to approach us for help, or if they're just simply trying not to get in trouble, that problem is going to linger. And the longer they cover it up, the worse it's going to be. And we also saw plenty of instances over the last year. Procurement has the tendency to do the 80-20, because 80% of our spend is with 20% of our suppliers. That's where we're going to focus 100% of our time. But if you have a critical supplier that happens to be down there in that tail and they're small, it doesn't matter if they're a product or service. If that small supplier is critical to your operation and they don't come through, nobody cares what number they are when you line all of the suppliers up by spend. It doesn't matter. That was missed. And so my tendency would be, even if it feels against our instincts, even if it feels scary, to democratize, right? To consumerize all of these buying processes, bring more people into the fold. We need to have supporting systems because we do need to be guarding against risk, and we need to know who provides what service in what location. Who do we contact if there's a question or if something goes wrong? But the more we can open things up, in a way, we're actually recruiting more people into procurement. Most consumers in their personal lives make amazing decisions with spending money online. I think just like procurement has earned the trust of the organization and particularly of the C-suite, I think we have to think about distributed buyers in the organization as having earned the trust until they show us otherwise, that they can also handle more freedom. And yet, if something does go wrong, it's a great deal more complicated to deal with a service performance issue than it is to say, this decal is the wrong shade of blue, or this widget has the wrong sized hole inside, right? So then somebody needs to get involved so that people are being handled in the right way. But I'm always of the feeling that more access to information, more access to choices, but with the trade-off that you take responsibility. I mean, we're all adults in these organizations, and that's how we have to be able to solve these big complex problems together.